the national unions, assured foreign investors that no one would challenge the super low wage structures of the maquilas. The high-profit model of the border program encouraged American industries in the mid-1980s to persuade the federal government to replicate the Puerto Rico and Mexico experiments throughout the rest of the Caribbean and Central America. And so in the 1980s, as Michael Moore has addressed when he first went out to view these, the Reagan administration called this next stage the Caribbean Basin Initiative. What resulted from this program was the United States officials actually enticed U.S. companies to close down their U.S. factories and eliminate American jobs. But we will talk more about this process of change later on in the broadcast under neoliberalism. Now, immigration scholars and legal experts have written that the first of the pressures on immigration unanticipated by Congress in 1965 was a need to provide for the admission of refugees and asylees, individuals who had to leave their home countries in the face of persecution. Now, refugee asylee admissions cannot be anticipated in advance. They occurred during periods of political strife. And as a result, immigration laws vest the power to award refugee status with the Attorney General, or more broadly, with the executive branch. Now, by vesting the power to admit refugees or asylees with the executive branch, immigration law is often placed in conflict with foreign policy objectives, with the executive branch usually responding to the pressures of foreign policy objectives to the disadvantage of an orderly refugee asylee program. So scholars have noted that immigration law seeks a regulated and predictable flow of immigrants with predefined traits or characteristics so that the immigrants do not come into conflict with U.S.-born populations. But foreign policy, on the other hand, seeks to strengthen the United States relative to its enemies. Now, generally, when the two laws come into conflict, U.S. foreign policy laws, refugee asylee laws, the United States will admit as refugees and asylees the nationals of nations that the United States opposes, such as nationals of communist states. We have an example of this, of the Cuban experience that I'm encouraging you to rehearse. The Juan Gonzalez in The Harvest of Empire shares with you the Cuban experience, simply because Cuba had a revolution. The United States tried to stop that revolution, so the United States will admit Cubans as refugees from a Cuban nation, and this will happen in the 60s, 70s, up until the 80s. And the United States, again, let me just repeat, that the United States admits as refugees the nationals of nations that the United States opposes. So it will reject refugees or nationals of nations that the United States supports. So when you take a look at the massive flows of refugees from foreign communist states, for instance, Cubans in the 60s and 70s and early 1980s, and then the Vietnamese in the mid-1970s, it significantly altered the immigrant flow, and it created exactly the tensions with U.S.-born populations that the immigration law seeks to avoid. And so the tensions occurred regardless. And so the refugees and asylees became political pawns in a larger international foreign policy question. Now, the rationale for this understanding was to admit political refugees, but not economic refugees. Now, in practice, these distinctions have been impossible to make. But nonetheless, we're going to go and appreciate some Vietnamese experiences with the asylee refugee question. Let's go to understand and appreciate what these refugees and asylees faced in the 1970s, because they share with us something about what refugees and asylees are going through today.
You adrift on the sea for 3 days, and certainly it was very difficult to know during that time whether we're going to survive.
You look at Homs and Aleppo in Syria. Vietnam looked like that after the war.
I am the child of Vietnamese refugees who arrived prior to 1975. My family, together with 40 others, escaped from Vietnam on a very small fishing boat to Indonesia. It took 14 days.
My mother made all of us keep a backpack, and in it was an address of an aunt in San Francisco, just in case we got lost from each other.
My dad couldn't afford to tell everyone that he had sent me off. He said that, wherever you go, remember who you are, Sunny Lay is it's not just your name, it's my name too. And your grandfather's the name, so don't mess it up.
My parents did not let my grandparents know that we were escape. And I could see that my mother never forgive herself for leaving her parents behind. It's too difficult for me to,
There was no looking back. Certainly, there was no looking back for us at that time.
Whenever I hear that the Vietnamese resettlement was the last global resettlement of its kind, it's frightening because it's not like there are no more refugees. I have this fear that there are millions of people out there who don't have the resources that we benefited from and that I feel we gave back to. When I saw the picture of the little boys on the beach in Turkey, that is really bring back a lot of sad and horrifying memories.
No one would undertake that decision lightly, no matter what. How is it that you can hold on to 2 children and a wife and try to steer a boat at the same time?
If you look today, Syria, Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan, those people wouldn't have left had it been for regional conflicts, of which the U.S. has a hand in.
I truly believe all the nations that support the war are the nations that are responsible and should have the moral obligation to resettle all these refugees.
The visas get people in, but the resources that's necessary, all of that, somebody got to calculate quickly and really give a solution based on what we can afford or what we think our conscience can afford.
Again, that's a very most powerful presentation with regards to refugee asylee status. And as I shared with you again, by vesting the power to admit refugees with the executive branch, immigration law is often placed in conflict with foreign policy objectives. So it just depends on the administration and what the administration deems is who is worthy and who isn't with regards to foreign policy objectives. But this particular film clip of the Vietnamese, remember, the Vietnamese and those who experienced being refugees and asylees, they encountered the racialization process. And as you see their testimony, they're understanding very clearly what is going on today with regards to the refugee asylee problem, not only in the Middle East, but here in the United States likewise. And as one particular interviewee shared, it is a result of U.S. foreign policy. U.S. foreign policy is what causes the migration. And so it's up to the administration to decide who to admit and who not to. So it becomes a political football, and these peoples become the victims of this political football. So let's appreciate that.